a slide. Let's say this, let's skip that one, go to the next one. Perfect, let's say this together, would you? Jenison Christian Church exists to help. Oh man, you guys are great. That's awesome. I heard you, and I was like, I'm going to stop and listen. That's our mission statement of our church and the heartbeat of our church. And one of the questions that we ask ourselves as leaders, Neil, who gave the community meditation, is one of our elders. One of the questions we ask ourselves as leaders and are constantly asking you to think about is, what does it look like to be a passionate follower of Jesus? If we're going to be people who claim to follow after Jesus and want to do the kinds of things that Jesus did and the things that he went after, we want to go after those too, then what does it look like to be that kind of person? That matters to us a lot as leaders, and I hope it matters a lot to you as followers of Jesus. And so we're going to talk today from Matthew chapter 18. If you want to go ahead and turn there in your Bibles, we're going to talk about something that's very close to the heart of God. It's something that's very close to the heart of being a follower of Jesus that you simply can't get around and can't avoid if you're going to be his disciple. You got to face it head on, okay? And sometimes it's every day, sometimes it's multiple times a day. We are going to talk today about forgiveness. Forgiveness. And we need to define that word just so that we're all clear on what it means as we get started today. Biblically, the basic idea of forgiveness, and I've shared this with you before when we've talked about forgiveness other times, the basic idea of forgiveness is that you take the guilt, right, that the person has done a wrong to you. You take that guilt, you remove it from them, and you restore that relationship that you have with them back to what it was before, okay? A person hurts you, they offend you, they lie to you, they cheat, they steal from you or something like that, right? You take that guilt that they have, you remove it away, and you restore that relationship that you had to what it was before they hurt you. That's what forgiveness is. And I want to be really clear here at the beginning because I don't want some of you to sit there wondering for the next 25 minutes about this, that I want you to think that we're mostly talking about forgiveness in kind of horrible terms. I'm talking about forgiveness today in mostly just normal, everyday relationships with your spouse, with your kids, with your parents, with your coworkers. I'm talking about that kind of forgiveness today. Okay? I know that we live in a world where abuse is super prevalent. I get that, right? The stats tell us that every woman, 1 out of 4 women are going to be abused in their lifetime. 1 out of 5 males are going to be abused in some way in their lifetime. And so I know it's a very prevalent thing, but that's kind of not what we're talking about. I do want to acknowledge it up front, that abuse is a different kind of a situation than what we're talking about, and I don't want you to sit there for the next 20 minutes saying, what about? It would be a tragedy if you did that and missed how important it is that we deal with just regular forgiveness in all the rest of life. Okay, because that's so much more common than the abuse part of it. Because all of us get hurt in different days or different weeks in different ways, and so it's a lot more common of a thing. Passionate followers of Jesus are people who forgive, and so whether it's a horrible thing like abuse or whether it's just ordinary run-of-the-mill hurts that we inflict on each other in our lives, there's a tension that comes with that. There's a challenge that comes with forgiveness. And that tension is also the big idea that we're going to kind of be working around today as we talk through this. And the tension is this. Forgiveness can be very, very hard, right? It can be incredibly difficult to forgive someone. And at the same time, as followers of Jesus, unforgiveness is unthinkable. And there's a tension that comes with that, right? Because we know that forgiveness is hard, it hurts, it can be very difficult, but at the same time, as followers of Jesus, we know that it has to be done. And so this tension of this challenge, Peter feels that. Peter felt that. One of the 12 disciples, he comes to Jesus, Matthew chapter 18, because he wants to know, just like you do, just like I do, just like we do. He wants to know, how do I manage that? How do I manage those two things and balance those tensions, that tension that forgiveness is hard, and yet I know I need to do it. And you've asked that same question in your life that Peter's going to ask in just a minute. You might not have asked it in these words, but you've asked it before at some point. Here's how Peter asked it. Matthew chapter 18, verse 21. Peter came up to Jesus And he asked, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times? Why is he asking? We don't know. Maybe one of the other disciples has they've done him wrong, right? They've hurt him or something. John has, he's stolen my thunder at 6 ministry stops in a row. John is he's being a jerk, right? He's being mean, right? He's hurt me. How many times do I have to forgive him? 7 times? Maybe it's something like that. Maybe it's something different, right? You've asked that question before, though. God, this hurts. I've been hurt. It's happened multiple times now. How many times do I have to forgive Phil? How many times do I have to forgive Sarah? How many times do I have to forgive him or her? How many times do I have to forgive? What does forgiveness look like in the life of a passionate follower of Jesus? That's what Peter's asking. My poor wife, she asks that question every other day, right? Right? Maybe even every day, right? God, he did it again. He's an idiot, right? How many times do I have to forgive him? You've asked that question yourself. God, he promised that he would do that job, and he didn't do it again, right? How many times do I have to forgive him? God, my coworker stole my idea again. How many times do I have to forgive her? God, I was at church today. The same person, idiot, came up to me and they said the same dumb thing. It's 4 weeks in a row, God. How many times do I have to forgive? It was the preacher, God, right? Right? How many times do I have to forgive? There's a million examples. Peter says, how many times? Up to 7 times? You might wonder why does Peter pick that number? I mean, it's kind of random, right? Feels kind of random, maybe. I don't know the answer. Why did he pick 10? Why did he pick 12 or some other number? We don't know. The number 7 in Jewish thought was a number that represented completeness and wholeness and kind of fullness and kind of perfection. So maybe he picked that number because it's the perfect number. That's how many times I need to forgive someone. I don't know. I tend to think, this is my speculation, right? I tend to think that Peter had a different reason for picking that number. I think that Peter was doing the very best that he could to be generous, to be super generous. That's my opinion, because here's the thing. The rabbis of Jesus' day, the other teachers of Jesus, they debated this question a lot. They would talk about it, they would argue about it, fight about it, and the rabbis of Jesus' day had come to a conclusion that based on some Old Testament passages, if you read them a certain way, based on that, you had to forgive a person 3 times, right? They hurt you, they wrong you, they do something wrong to you, they do it over and over again. You had to forgive them up to 3 times. But after that, the 4th time, and the 5th time, and the 10th time, all bets are off. You can do whatever you want. You don't have to forgive them. That's what the rabbis of Jesus said, of Jesus' day said. 3 times you had to forgive them. And so Peter, I think that he knows that the rabbis and the Pharisees and the teachers of the law and the experts of the law, what are they? They're stingy. They're punks, right? They're jerks, right? They never give people like the extra grace that they need. They're like that. And Peter thinks to himself, I'm gonna one up the rabbis, and that's going to probably be what Jesus wants. And so he asks that question, how many times do I have to forgive? He says, I'm gonna say 3, I'm gonna double it, right? And I'm gonna add 1. I think he's probably throwing his shoulder out of joint, right? Patting himself on the back a little bit, because he's saying, Jesus, how many times shall I forgive them? Up to 7 times, verse 22. Jesus answered Peter, he said, I tell you, Peter, not 7 times, but 77 times. And I so much wish that we knew how Jesus answered this question, right? I wish we knew like how he articulated that sentence. I just kind of read it straight out, right? But what if Jesus pauses in the middle of that and he says, well, Peter, I tell you, not 7 times. And I wonder if he paused there and Peter just thought, oh, hallelujah, not 7. He's going to say something, lower, 3, 5, 6, anything else. And he's, feeling pretty good. I wonder if he paused right there and then Jesus jumps right back in. He says, not 7 times, 77 times. And Peter, his eyes, right, get giant, wide open as like saucers. He says, what? What? Because I think Peter would have been blown away. Nobody else preaches that. Nobody else teaches that. No Pharisee would endorse anything like that. This number that Jesus is talking about for forgiveness, it might be 77 times like it says in my Bible. If you have a footnote, a paper Bible, you got a footnote, it might say forgive them 70 times. 490 times. It might say either one of those, but either way, the point that Jesus is making with this giant number is clearly that, according to Jesus, you keep on forgiving indefinitely. That's the point that he's making, right? You get hurt, you're injured by somebody, you give unlimited forgiveness to other people. His point is not that when you get to hurt number 78, you don't have to do it anymore, right? That's not what he's saying. His point, when you get to 491 times that you haven't, picked up your dirty laundry. I pointed her, but I'm talking about me, right? You do that so many times. His point is not when you get to number 491, then she doesn't have to forgive me anymore. That's not the point. The point is you have to keep on doing it indefinitely, forever. Here's the thing. Forgiveness is not about math, right? It's about mercy. It's not about math, it's about mercy. What you want to know sitting out there today is how many times do I have to let them hurt me before I can stop forgiving them? That's what you want to know. You know how I know that? Because it's the same thing that I want to know. How many times do I have to let them hurt me before I can stop forgiving them? But God, it hurts. It hurts. 77 times? 490 times? Really? Even after repeated, even after betrayal? Even after abuse? Yeah, apparently forgiveness isn't about math. It's about mercy. How do I make the relationship like it was before? I think that, who knows, there's a dead silence, kind of like it is in here right now. Or maybe there's like this confused babble, right? Peter and anybody else who's listening in, they're just kind of talking, what in the world, 77? Maybe it's a gasp. Wow, whatever that gap is, Jesus steps into it with a story, a little example of his own, okay? So Jesus says, listen, Peter, I know that sounds crazy. I know it sounds nuts, but let me give you an example. Let me tell you what it's kind of like, all right? He said, and Jesus says this, verse 23. He says, Peter, it's like this. He says, therefore, the kingdom of heaven, this time, this place where everybody is doing what God says, when everybody's living under God's reign. The kingdom of heaven is like this. It's like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants, okay? The king wants to settle accounts. The king has loaned out money to a bunch of different people, and he wants to settle accounts. So he's going to call in those loans. He's going to say, come in, we're going to settle this up, we're going to even the books, we're going to make this all right. So there's a bunch of people who are, going in and coming out from the throne room, right, to talk with the king to settle up their debts. I want you to put yourself in the position of one of these servants for just a minute, all right? You're sitting there at work, or you're sitting there at home, and your phone rings, and you pull it out of your pocket, and you look down, and it says Fifth Third Bank, or whatever your bank is, right? And you're like, this is kind of weird. Why would they be calling me in the middle of the day? This has got to be a telemarketing thing or something like that. They don't realize I'm already their customer. And you say, okay, I'll answer the phone. So you answer it, and the voice on the other end of the line says, hi, we'd like you to come in today. We want to have a little chat about this little matter of your mortgage and your car loan and your second mortgage. We want to talk about it. How would you feel when that happens? I don't know how this guy feels, but put yourself in that position. That doesn't give you the warm fuzzies. That's what happened these days. Verse 24. As he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 bags of gold was brought to him. 10,000 bags of gold. Most of the older translations, if you've been a Christian a long time, you've probably seen the more literal translation that people used to say 10,000 talents all right? Which is a word that doesn't mean like skills or abilities or things like that. It's a unit of measurement. It's a unit of weight, all right, in Jesus' day. And so 10,000 talents was a lot of money. That's why we translate now 10,000 bags of gold. We don't know exactly how much money that we're talking about here, but we can make an educated guess. Here's the thing. We know that a talent in Jesus' day was worth about 20 years of wages for a day laborer. One talent is worth 20 years of wages for a day laborer, okay? You with me? All right? You do the math and you work that out. One talent is worth, all this money, 10 hours a day, 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, for a week, for a month, for a year, 20 years. That's one talent. Multiply it by 20. This guy comes into the king, and he owes approximately $11 billion in today's dollars. $11 billion. And the king says, come on in, let's talk about this little matter of this loan that I've made to you. Can he pay this debt? No. Will he ever be able to pay this debt? No. Keep reading. Verse 25, since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all that he had be sold to repay the debt. At this, is it really going to repay it? No, it's not going to repay it. It's going to be the best the king can possibly get to sell this guy and his family into slavery. It's the best he can hope for. Verse 26, at this, the servant fell on his knees before him. Be patient with me, he begged, and I will pay back everything. That's a promise that sets a record, right? The least likely to be fulfilled promise of all time. It seriously is. There's no way that this guy will ever be able to pay this debt of $11 billion back. It's impossible. And yet, look, verse 27, the servant's master, the king, took pity on him, canceled the debt, and let him go. Here's what's so special about this. Okay? Here's what's so special is that not only is this guy's inability to pay the debt at this moment forgiven, it's not just an at the moment thing. It's not that the king took his debt and deferred it like a student loan. That's not what he does. He takes this $11 billion debt and he says, we're all square. It's gone. I've forgotten about it. Pretty amazing thing, right? That's the amazing thing. That is the essence of how God has forgiven you and how God has forgiven me. It is total, it is undeserved, it is impossible to earn. It is exactly what it looks like to make the relationship like it was before you screwed up. That's what God has done for us. God says, you know what? It's okay. All is forgiven. All is even. Let's wipe it clean and start over from the beginning. How do you feel when you get forgiven? When somebody forgives you? How do you feel? Most of the time, I think most of us feel joy, right? Or thanks, or some feeling like that. That's probably the most common thing, but that's not the only thing that people feel when they get forgiven. Some people never quite make it to that joy stage. All they feel is relief. Oh, good. And they never kind of progress to joy. Some people, when they get forgiven, you know what they prefer to do? They prefer, I'd rather keep that guilt and just kind of carry it around with me. Some people do that. Maybe you do that. Some people, if you've seen this, it's a weird one, but it happens. Some people, when they get forgiven, they get bitter. You ever seen that? Sometimes people get bitter over the fact that they needed to be forgiven. Maybe they're irritated that they had to go ask for forgiveness in the first place, right? See that with teenagers sometimes, right? People have all kinds of different reactions. I get the sense that this guy who's just been forgiven is maybe the latter. The last one, the kind of the guy who gets bitter. And here comes the crisis point. Verse 28 is our guy who's gotten this incredible gift that he's received. Is he going to pass that on to others, or what's he going to do? You'd expect that to be the case. Verse 28. But when that servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 silver coins. Our guy first guy goes out from the throne room. He's found unexpected forgiveness, incredible debt, fully canceled out. He goes out and he decides to call in his own loan, that he's loaned another guy some coins, right, from his own buddy. And so now number 2 guy owes our guy not 10,000 talents, $11 billion. He doesn't owe him 1 talent. This second guy owes 100 silver coins. The original language says 100 denarii. 1 denarius was worth about a day's wages. So if you have 100 of those, it's about 3 months of wages, right? Do the math again in your head. It's about $18,000 in Michigan. Second guy number 2, owes about $18,000. Compared to 11 billion, pittance. It's tiny, right? But look at our guy. Our guy, he grabbed him, began to choke him. Pay back what you owe me, he demanded. His fellow servant fell to his knees, begged him, be patient with me, and I will pay it back. And he might be able to, right? $18,000, that's a lot of money. But you guys have debt, right? You've paid off debt before. It's doable, Disney, it's doable. Verse 30, but our guy refused. Instead, he went off, had the man thrown into prison until he could pay the debt, which now he would never be able to pay. Because once you're thrown into debtor's prison, you don't have any way to make any money. And so our guy has given guy number 2 a death sentence in jail the rest of his life. Here's the point that Jesus is making. Anytime that somebody has wronged you, you have a choice. You have a choice. Peter asked the question. We asked the same one. God, how many times do I have to forgive my brother? Jesus says, you've got a choice. How are you going to respond? Verse 31. When the other servants saw what had happened, they were outraged and went and told their master everything that had happened. Everybody else realizes the wrongness of what this guy has done, except the guy. He's the only one who's blind to what he's done. Verse 32, then the master called the servant in. You wicked servant, he said, I canceled all that debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you? In anger, his master handed him over to the jailers to be tortured until he should pay back all he owed, which would be never. How many times should I forgive my brother when he sins against me? 7 times? Jesus says, you tell me. He says, let me put it in perspective for you. 2 guys, he says, exact same situation. They both owe. It's just a difference of degree, right? They both owe. Both are in debt. Both have screwed up. Both of them have messed up. Both of them need forgiveness. Numbers can be hard to visualize, and I understand that. So let me show this debt comparison to you in graphic form. Now, I'm not great at putting a graph together, and so it's kind of, the numbers look kind of weird. This debt is in units of $2 billion. I know it says 0.2, 0.4, 0.6. I don't know why it says that. It's just, you have to forgive me, right? I screwed up. 2 billion units. And so the blue bar represents our first guy's debt, $11 billion. With me? The orange bar, the second bar that's on there, is overlaid over top of the blue one, okay? And I know what the obvious question is. Where's the orange bar, right? Nate, you're a dork. You forgot to put the orange bar on it. Here's the thing. I did not forget to put the orange bar on there. It is on there, all right? It's just that the difference between $11 billion being forgiven and $18,000 being forgiven is so significant. It's so giant of a chasm that the orange doesn't even show up on here. Jesus says to people who want to be passionate followers of Jesus, he says this, anytime you decide to withhold forgiveness, you are the first servant. You're the one who's been forgiven. Put that back up again, would you? That graph. You're the one who's been forgiven of a giant blue debt, and you've refused to forgive this tiny, insignificant speck of a debt? Do you know, I wish I could do this. If you took this graph, and if I could magically stretch it out, so proportionally, right? If I could magically stretch it out so that it surrounded us on the walls of this room, with me? If we could do that so that the blue goes all the 210 feet approximately, if you could do that, do you know how big the orange debt would be at that point? Blue goes all the way around the building. You know how big the orange debt would be? The width of a hair. 1/10 of 1 millimeter is how big the orange debt would be. The second debt would be. How many times should I forgive? Jesus asked. You tell me. He says, whatever hurt has been done to you in your life, my friends, is real. Okay? $18,000 is not insignificant. When you get hurt, it's real. And it hurts, and it causes pain, and it's a thing, okay? We get that. We're not denying that. But in the bigger picture, any hurt that a person has done to you in your life on this earth, it's a speck compared to what Jesus has done for you and for me. And this is a hard truth for today. Anytime you don't forgive your brother or your sister, you are the first servant. Insanely forgiven and insanely unwilling to forgive. It's just crazy, right? It's just crazy. The craziest thing, though, is not that. That's not even the most shocking part. Jesus finishes up that story, and then he brings it back to the very beginning. Bigger twist even than Peter or you or I ever saw coming. Verse 35. Jesus says, this is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you, thrown into prison, death sentence, unless you forgive your brother or your sister from your heart. What? Jesus said, what? Really? Jesus, you're saying that your forgiveness of me is dependent on my forgiveness of the hurts that other people do to me? Really? You're really saying that? That's a kick in the seat of the pants. It's not the only time that Jesus said it. The disciples come to Jesus. They say, Jesus, teach us how to pray. He says, okay, pray like this. Forgive us our debts. How? As we forgive our debtors, right? If we don't forgive, he won't. It's crazy, isn't it? For passionate followers of Jesus, unforgiveness is not a bad habit. It's a salvation issue. It's a salvation issue. When you offer forgiveness from your heart, it is proof, it is evidence that in your life you have received God's forgiveness yourself. God's forgiveness of us is inseparably tied to how we forgive other people. The eternal stakes are clear. Heaven is a community of people who have been forgiven and who forgive others. And if you refuse to forgive other people on this life, on this earth right now, you are saying, I don't belong there. I don't belong in heaven. That's what you're saying, okay? I know that's pretty brutal, isn't it? It's pretty brutal. I'm going to give you a few things that hopefully will help you to be encouraged as you walk the path of forgiveness in real life. I just want to point out 3 things this morning, and that is this. Starting with the first one. Understand that when you forgive someone, forgiveness does not equal enabling, okay? So we're bringing it back to kind of the beginning, talking about abuse and things. Forgiveness is not enabling. And so we're not going to sugarcoat abuse in here or ongoing intentional sin in people's lives. Forgiveness is, it still needs to happen in those cases, okay? So it's going to be incredibly difficult, going to be incredibly different than just regular forgiveness. It still needs to happen, even for abuse, but you are never, listen to me carefully, you are never expected to put yourself back into that kind of a relationship where you know that you're going to be abused again. Forgiveness is not enabling the other party to continue on purpose to hurt you. Physically, mentally, emotionally, verbally. Jesus said, forgive. Jesus also said what? Be shrewd. Be wise in how you deal with other people. And so listen to me. I say women, but it's men too. 1 out of 5 men. If you are in an abusive situation right now, you need to talk to somebody to get help and to be able to get into a safe place. Talk to me or our elders or our wives or somebody else that you trust and get you pointed in a safe direction if you're in a situation like that, all right? Forgiveness is not enabling. Here's another thing. When we forgive, I kind of hinted at this already. When we forgive, we acknowledge that the hurt that we've been, given, that it's real. When we forgive, we acknowledge that the hurt that we've been given is real. And in a normal relationship, we also acknowledge that it is almost certain that that exact same hurt will happen to us again. Okay? We acknowledge that the hurt is real and that it's almost certainly going to happen again. So forgiveness, when you forgive somebody, it doesn't mean that we're going to ignore the pain that happened to us. We're not going to ignore the fact that it hurts. And we also are going to acknowledge that it doesn't mean it won't happen again. Let me describe what I mean. I've got black raspberries in a corner of my yard. They're wild raspberries. I have kind of cultivated them over the years. I string them up so that they grow good. I prune them so the berries get bigger than normal wild strawberries. Every once in a while when I go back there to work, I forget to take my gloves, my work gloves, all right? And so I'll be pruning back there or picking or whatever, and ow, get stuck with a thorn, right? It hurts. It hurts. Forgiveness is like pulling out a thorn from your finger or from your thumb. When you pull out a thorn away from your thumb, it takes away the source of the pain, right? What's left? Your thumb, and it still hurts, right? It still hurts. Even though the thorn's gone, but your thumb still hurts. Healing is a separate step that God gives us on this path of forgiveness. It's a separate thing. But that pain is real that you feel when you get hurt. At the exact same time, I am going to keep going back to my black raspberry patch over and over again. Every year, I'm going to go back there. Why? Because I know that at some point, even though I'm going to get stuck with another thorn, I believe that the benefits of going back to that patch are greater than the hurt that I'm going to feel when I get hurt again. Make sense? And so when you forgive somebody in a relationship, you're saying two things. You're saying, man, you really hurt me. It hurt. But you're also saying, I'm going to wipe that away and I'm going to come back to you and we are going to have this thing again just like it was before, restored to a healthy place. Even though I know you're going to do it to me again probably down the road, I value you and our relationship so much that I'm going to do that. Does that make sense? It's real and it's going to happen again, but we're going to forgive anyway. And here's the last thing. The motivation for forgiveness and the power to forgive comes when we stop focusing not on what other people have done to us, but when we start focusing on what God, what Jesus has done for us. When God canceled your debt, your blue bar, when He did that, He gave you power to cancel others' debt. Mike Williams is an author who wrote a commentary on Matthew, and in his commentary, he tells the story of his stepdad. His stepfather, when Mike was growing up, was a jerk. He caused a ton of pain in Mike's life, caused a ton of pain in Mike's family's life. And his stepdad left the family when Mike was in his teens, and Mike just was left with a ton of hostility towards him. Mike ended up going to Vietnam to serve in the war. He was a soldier. And you know, the stress of war, the hurts of war, the pains of war just kind of magnify everything in your life. And so he's over there fighting the war, and he's thinking about his jerk stepdad at the same time. And the animosity grows in him until he gets to a point where he thinks to himself, when I get back to the States, the first time I see my stepdad, I'm going to kill him. Mike survived the war. He comes back to the States. Within a year, he becomes a Christian, becomes a follower of Jesus. And didn't think much about his stepdad. Until 4 years later, there's a knock at his door. It's the house where he lives with his wife and his little girl. And it's his stepdad who's tracked him down. Mike's wife invited him in. The three of them sat there on the couch making polite conversation. And all of a sudden, Mike said, that vow that I made came back to my mind. He turned to his stepdad. He said, I made a vow in Vietnam that the first time I saw you, I'd kill you. Today, it's that day. He said a terrified look came over his dad's face. Honestly, he said his dad started to sweat. His dad started to scoot down the couch towards the door. And then Mike said to him, but now I know that I'm no better a person than you. God has forgiven me. And if he can forgive a sinner like me, I can forgive you. I will not allow you to hurt my family again, so don't think that this is made out of weakness. Rather, I forgive you because I have been forgiven. Years later, Mike wrote this in his commentary. He said, my ability to forgive came from the eternal, loving act of grace in Jesus' sacrifice for my sin. I discovered that the key to forgiveness is to stop focusing on what others have done to us and focus instead on what Jesus has done for us. I can put that into 3 words. Forgiven people forgive. Forgiven people forgive. Passionate followers of Jesus. We have been infinitely forgiven, more than we will ever be asked to forgive another person. And so I'll ask you this question as we finish up. Who is it that God is calling you to forgive this week? Can I pray for you? God, I know that there are tons of hurts in this little room with 100 people in it, and our listeners on live stream. I know there's a ton of hurts just in our little group, and I think about the hurts that are spread across 8 billion people on this planet. And God, you know every one of them. God, you care about every one of them. You know that the hurts are real and the pains that we feel from whoever did this to us, that it's real. God, we also know that what you have done for us makes our hurts just pale in comparison. And God, I pray you'll help us to remember this mental picture that Jesus gives us of these 2 servants. And God, help us to be people who offer forgiveness, not because we're great people, not because we're special, but God, because you have done something for us that it's just so crazy that we can't even believe it, but we do. And we trust that you'll give us the power and the ability and the motivation to forgive that person who has sinned against us. God, I pray that for every person here today. God, I pray that for all of our live streamers today, that you'll give us the power and ability and motivation to forgive our hurts. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you for being here today. Let me hit a couple of announcements really quick. We got a ton of stuff coming up in the next couple of weeks. 2 weeks from today is youth kickoffs. That's for middle school and senior high students. That's going to be right after church, okay? And there will be a parents' meeting that is a part of that. Every parent of every kid is asked to be at that luncheon and that meeting. And then the kids will go have some big-time fun after that. That's in 2 weeks. Hand-to-hand food collection will also begin that day, September 7th, I think it is. And so be watching for the grocery cart out in the lobby to be able to take Post-its off there and bring food back in. We could use we kind of have all the spots covered in hand-to-hand. We could use, there is a spot for deliveries. I think they're on Thursday morning. Is that right? Thursday mornings. It could be kind of like any time between like 8:30 and 11:30. You get to make your own schedule within that range. It takes about an hour to pick stuff up from the church. It's already prepared here at the church. We got a team who does that. Just pick it up, put it in your car, drive it to Jenison Early Childhood Center, and just you take it inside the building and drop it outside of their classroom. It takes about an hour to do that. We could use a volunteer or a team who would, a husband and wife, or a small group, or somebody who would say, we'll take one Thursday a month or something like that. So if you'd be interested in doing that, Sandy, raise your hand real high. Go see that hand, right? If you're interested in being a part of that. Kids Hope USA, mentoring, where we go over to Pinewood Elementary, which is that direction, like a mile away from here, Pinewood Elementary, and we mentor kids about once a week for about 45 minutes. We have 5 mentors who are doing it right now, which is awesome. I'm super thankful. There are 9 kids who are still on the waiting list to have a mentor, somebody who will sit and listen to them for an uninterrupted 45 minutes. They don't have that anywhere else in their life. They don't have it from mom. They don't have it from dad. Where an adult who cares about them will just sit across on them and color or play games or talk or shoot baskets or whatever it is. You can do all kinds of different things as a part of that. And so there's a registration space out in the lobby for that where you can see Pat Howard. I don't think she's here today. Or you could see me. I would love to talk with you more about it. Speaking of them, we got a thank you card from Jenison Public Schools. Thank you for your support this past school year and this coming year. We look forward to our continued partnership in Kids Hope. Thank you so much for the valuable Kids Hope support and your kind care of Pinewood. Lives are changed because of you. That's a public school teacher who wrote that note to us. And so thank you for maybe thinking about volunteering for that. Last thing I want to mention, next Sunday is going to be Family Sunday, which is super fun. Kids preschool and up will be in here with adults, and it's super fun. I'm going to be gone, unfortunately. My family has a little camping trip planned in God's country, but it's going to be awesome still here. Family Sunday, the service goes about 45 minutes, so if you're a short service guy or girl, you'll like that, 45 minutes. And we have some people who have some fun things and really cool things, some cool worship together kinds of things that are planned for that week. I think that's it. We love you guys. Keep on being passionate followers of Jesus. Have a great week.